Hello everybody, this is Mr. Ellefson with Rough Cut Woodworking, and today this video is going to go through how to do a slightly elevated technique on a spire on the CNC machine. It's called an inlay technique, and what I'm going to take you through today is how to make a simple coaster and inlay an image into that coaster, whatever you're looking for, whether it be text or numbers or some kind of logo or whatever. So I'll take you through the four main steps. Step one is simply engraving what you want onto a piece of wood. Step two is making a mirror image of what you just engraved to make what's called a positive, or something that'll fit into the negative that was your original cut. Then step three, we glue it together, and step four, we get it sanded down and looking good and put a finish on it. So we're going to start here in a spire, open it up, and create a new file. And what we're looking for, go ahead and make a 4.5 square image, and we're only going to make it a 1/2 inch thick. A 3/4 inch thick coaster is too much. You can do a little bit different, but please keep something in mind. A 4.5 inch square is way too small to fit on its own through a planer, through something to make it thinner than the 1-inch wood that I have in my shop. So please plan ahead. You need it to be at least 10, 12 would be better. So if you want to share with somebody, to, cut a piece or make more than one, that's fine. Just plan ahead on that. But we'll do 4.5, 4.5, and 5. Go ahead and do center justified instead of upper left, so that there's a dot right in the middle, and then hit OK. So here is our drawing area. First thing we're going to do is draw a circle. And in this case, I can just tell it how big I want it to be. I'm going to do a diameter of 3.5. And that's as big as I want your coaster. Go ahead and hit create. And since I have zeros here for X and Y, it's going to zero it right in the center, which is where I want it anyway. And then close that out. Now the reason we did a bigger block is because I need the areas in the corners to help hold this down with on my machine. So it does help to have that extra. So next thing we're going to do is try to find an image. So if I go online, and I've already done a few searches that I'm going to show you. So you can, for example, I started with football team logos, and yes, you can engrave them, and some of them would work better than others though. For example, this Cowboys logo would work very well. There's very few colors and all the lines are straight. Some of these would work okay. This one would be a little harder. The Green Bay would work well. But what you want to avoid are teams that have a lot of detail. Like this wouldn't work very well. Too much detail, too much color. Things are too close together. So I went on and said black and white animal pictures. This obviously won't work. There's a lot of gray in there. There's no lines. It's hard to follow. So that's no good. So we type in black and white line drawings, which would be better, but there's still a lot more detail than I like. Some of these might work. So here's what you're looking for. Type in silhouette. I just put in animal silhouette, but you can put in anything you want, depending on if you're looking for a specific logo or whatever, football team, sports team, whatever. Try to find a silhouette. So I found what I wanted. You click on it, and the image increases in size a little bit. Then you want to save it. Right-click, save image as, and then I saved it on my desktop under the word animals. So mine is right there. I've already saved it, so I would type in the word animals and hit enter, and in my case, yeah, just go ahead and save it again. That's fine. So when I lower this down, mine is right here, okay? So I'm going to go back into Aspire. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit so I can grab this image and just drop it right there. Now, if you try to drop an image in here and it doesn't do it, it's probably the wrong extension. So you need to go and find another image. So it's either a JPEG or a PNG or something that'll work that this recognizes. But once you have something that'll import, fine. You can enlarge it a little bit, that's fine. We're not going to deal with that yet, but it's a JPEG image, and as you can see, I have a whole bunch of animals, a whole bunch of them there that I don't want. I only want the elephant. My name is Mr. Ellefson, so I thought that'd be clever. So we're going to put an elephant image in the middle of this. So what we have to do is outline this with a line, make a vector out of this image. So with this highlighted, I've already highlighted it, okay, it's surrounded in kind of purple color. Go to create vectors, and the fourth one down on the left looks like a bird, and some of it is outlined. And because it's a black and white image, I'm just going to look for black and white colors. And this is pretty simple. Just go down and hit preview, and you can see that it outlines all the black color. And that's exactly what I want anyway. So we hit apply and hit close. Now, if you have a color image, you'll use the color one and try it out, but I'm not going to worry about that yet. That's more of an advanced technique that we'll deal with later. But I've got my images. Now I can click on the original and hit delete. So now all those images are gone. The background, the original image is gone. I still have the silhouettes, the outlines that I want. So they're kind of in the way, so I'm going to move them out. I don't want all of them. All I want is the elephant. But when I click on it, I get all of them. Right click, ungroup objects, and you can hit onto original layers. That's fine. Now I can get rid of individual animals. So I'm going to get rid of these. Just hit delete. Don't hit backspace, delete. Okay, and get rid of all those, delete. I'm going to zoom in. I don't see any odd lines, like there's no eye here that I need to delete. Any errant lines, so this looks good. Okay, so I can grab that, click on it again, and then move it over. Now, it is too small, so I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. To center it, just go over here to this white button under Transform Objects, and click the middle one, and that centers both directions. Great. And I may still enlarge it, I don't know, we'll see. The only other thing I want you to do is to put a little engraved border around the outside edge. So we're going to grab the outside line and do what's called an offset. So that's this first one in the offset and layout area. Click it, and I want to go inwards, say 1/4 inch. I've already got that in there by default. We'd hit 0.25 and hit offset. Okay, so now I have one line, and I need to do it again. I don't want the border here between them. I want it inside of that. So I'm going to offset this line again, but this time I'm only going to do maybe 1/8 of an inch. No reason, just the way I like it. You could do 1/4 inch, that'd be fine too. But this is what I wanted it to look like, so I do an 1/8 inch inlay, and this will be my border. So now my elephant, I'm going to make a little bigger to get closer to that line. Just about like that, and then center it again. And there we are. Perfect. That's what I'm looking for. And you can have any image you want. Obviously, I don't want this to touch my engraved outside edge, and this is good. So now that all my lines exist, now I need to tell the machine what to do with those lines. So under View, we hit the blue button, and that scrolls over to my Toolpath menu. The outside one is easy. We're gonna cut it out. Now that's gonna be our very last thing we want to do. So we'll save that for a little bit later. For now, I just want to engrave this inlay and this elephant. So I'm gonna grab all of them, and I'm going to use what's called a V-carve. And in this case, I don't want to, if I tried to V-carve this, it would go all the way through that 1/2 inch block. So I need to tell it to stop at a certain point. And I want you to use these numbers, 0.15 inches deep. All right? I'm going to hit select. This 90 degree is a really wide bit, so I want something a little more detailed. So we're going to select, and I want you to use a 60 degree right there, 60 degree, 0.25, and hit OK. Now, it's going to take forever to engrave this elephant with a 60 degree sharp point, V bit. So what I'm going to do is use a flat area clearance tool. In other words, I'm telling the computer, use a different bit to clear out most of this image. And then the little fine details that it can't get, the V-carve will do the rest. So I need to tell it which bit to use. Now, because it's so tiny, I'm going to use an end mill that's 1/8 of an inch. That's 0.125 inches in diameter. So it's a very small tool, but it does a lot faster job than that V-carve. And then go ahead and hit OK. And then scroll down and hit calculate, and let's see what it does. All right, I'm going to slow this down just a little bit, hit play. And you can see the 1/8 inch end mill is clearing out most of it. I'm going to speed that up a little. Does it in 2 passes, and then the V-carve comes in and does the rest. So you can see it did most of it, and the V-carve did the feet and the tail and a lot of the trunk right there. And that's what I'm looking for. So it went in 0.15 inches, and we have our engraved area. All right, very good. Go back to your 2D view. So that one's done, and you can see that it made 2 different paths. The first one is with that clearance tool, that 1/8 inch end mill. The second one is the actual V carve with the V bit. So it does make two paths, so don't let that scare you. Now we're going to cut it out, and this is easy. We just grab this outside line, and we're going to use what's called a profile tool path. This one simply says, here's a line, here's the tool, follow that line. And that's all it does. So I'm going to go in the profile, and cut depth, the thickness of our block is 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put in 0.5 because I do want to cut all the way through. And we're going to use an end mill 0.25. If that isn't the default cutout, select, go to end mill 0.25 right there, hit OK, and that's correct. It's taking 2 passes, which is totally fine. I want it to cut outside the line. If I cut inside the line, it would lose that 1/4 inch. We don't want that. So outside the line, and I want to put in some tabs. And what I mean by that is when this bit cuts all the way through this board, this piece in the middle will be free to move, and it might get sucked up the dust collector, or at the very least, the blade could really do some damage as it's moving around. So I'm going to add some tabs. So you want to edit tabs, and I'm going to put a tab here and there. 2 is usually enough. And then we close it out. You don't have to change anything else on this screen. All right, then we scroll down, and I'd like you to ramp. Ramping simply means that the blade doesn't go straight down and start cutting. It actually angles down into the wood. It's a little bit easier on your blade, on your cutter that way. And then let's calculate so we can see what that looks like. Play. So it does its cuts, and you can see the tabs right there and there. That'll keep it steady and doesn't fall out. We'll cut that out later and sand those off, of course. But this is the engraved area, the negative, if you will, of your coaster. So the next step, if you're happy with it, save all of your G code. So first, I'm going to save the program file. File, save as. I'm going to put it on my desktop or whatever you put it, if you're putting it onto a thumb drive or anything like that. And we'll go my name, Ellison, negative, coaster, whatever you want to call it. So you know what it is, and we'll save that. All right, so I'm going to keep this image and these tool paths the rest of the time. So to get your G code, now go up here to G code, save tool path. Looks like a floppy disk. If you're old like me, you actually know what that is. And highlight all of the tools. Now this is very common. I'm using a number of different tools, but it says that these 2 tools have the same tool number assigned to them, and it doesn't know what to do because they're obviously different tools. This is an 1/8 inch. That's a V carve, and that's a 1/4 inch. So it says my pocket tool path and my V carve, these 2 have the same numbers. So I'm going to go and click on the V carve one. This one, that's my V carve, and I'm going to edit that V bit. And I just want to go down to tool number and say it's tool number 2, and hit OK, and you must calculate again. All right. Now I would expect that it would give me the same error for this one, but let's see what it does first when I hit this. Yes, so it says my pocket and my profile also are tool number 1. So this is number 1. I just made this one number 2. I'm going to make profile here number 3. Double click, go to edit, tool number 3, OK, and you must recalculate it. And now that should work. Save your G code. So now I have tool 1, tool 2, and tool 3. And you're going to save your tool paths onto a thumb drive that I'm going to give you. Take your thumb drive and put it in your computer, and it usually pops up. This one is called AFHS, or for American Fork High School. It may say USB, whatever. But save it onto this thumb drive and hit save. Okay, so I have my G code and I'm good to go. Close that out. Now, go back to your 2D and save it again. I want to get rid of those tool paths so it's a little cleaner. I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to save it under a different name. So I made the negative coaster. Now I'm going to make the positive coaster. So the opposite of that. So now that it's saved under a different name, I can make changes to this without fear of losing what I originally have. So first I'm going to delete all of these carvings. My lines, obviously, I'm going to keep. I want this, but I need to carve it the opposite way. So now so all the lines are here, and I just need to redo some of my tool paths. First thing we need to do is go back to our drawing And I need to carve out all of this area outside deeper. So this area and the elephant actually stick out as a positive. So I want to get rid of this stuff. So it's opposite of what I just did. So I need to draw a square, go up in the upper left corner here, hold the button and drag it down to the opposite corner right there. So you've just drawn a square. I need to tell it that from this area to here, I need it to be gone. It's actually to here, to this V carve. We'll get to that in a second. I need it to be carved down to a certain amount. We have all of our lines. We have to do this in some more stages than we did before. First, we're going to grab the elephant, hold shift, and then grab the line just outside of the elephant image. And we're going to again use a V carve. All right, there's the V carve. As far as your depths, this is where it can be a little bit confusing. For the depth of the flat depth, we went 0.15 with our engraved area, our negative area. Now I need a little bit of space for the glue at the bottom, so I don't want to go to 0.15 depth as well. There won't be any room for glue. It'll be so tight that it won't work. You'll have gaps everywhere. So I'm going to leave a 0.05 space for glue. So my flat depth, type in 0.1. Now that would fit nice and tight, but I also want this area to stick out a little bit. I want there to be a gap from this piece to the negative piece so that I can fit a bandsaw blade in between and cut them apart without really damaging my original, the one that I want to keep. And I want that to also be 0.1. So these are the numbers you're going to use. These two should add up a little more than your original, which it does. I had 0.15 on my negative, and I have 0.2 if I add these up with the positive. You're going to use the same bits. I'm going to use the same 0.125 end mill to clear it out because this is so detailed. And then go down and hit calculate. Let's reset that and preview those. Again, it made two carvings, two tool paths. So I carved it out, and then my V-carve did the rest of the work around the edges and made these angled like the original. Okay? Now then we have to take care of the outside. So we'll go back to our 2D image, and if I grab my square, hold shift, and if I grab the outside one, it's not going to work quite the same. Let me show you. We'll close this out. Again, we're going to do a V-carve, and we'll type in the same numbers, 0.1. All right. In this case, because there's no detail here, it's all big, I'm going to use a bigger bit. So I'm going to use the 0.25 end mill. 0.25 is right there, and hit OK, and then calculate that. So it just has fewer tool paths. It goes a little bit faster. But I mentioned that it wouldn't work right. Let me show you. So it did clear it out fine, but as you can see, this edge, this engraving here is way too thick. So I used the wrong line. So it's very simple. Go back and double click back into that same tool path and unclick, click that, the outside edge, hold shift and click that one, the inner one. Okay, and just hit calculate and it should redo it. Everything else should have been the same. 0.1, 60 degree, end mill 0.25. Nothing else has changed. And I'll hit calculate this time and preview all. And there we go. Now it's correct. This comes to a tip, sharp edge, which is going to fit nicely into my original piece. So this is now ready to be engraved, and we want to save it just like we did before. So we close it out. And again, I'm going to go File, Save As, and I want to save it in the same place. So in my case, I did desktop. This one is the positive. Hit save. Yes, it should be right over top of the original, and hit yes. That's fine. Get G code, bottom right, save the tool path. And it might say the same thing. Yeah, it's got a few of them. So my V-carve 4 and 5 have the same issue. So we got to change that, and I'll go back and change that right now. There we go. So now all of the bits have different numbers. Now the V bits, of course, have the same number, which is fine. But I have a 0.25 end mill and a 0.125, and they had to be different numbers. So now we can save it onto that thumb drive again. It should be right there. And I'm going to keep the same name, Ellefson Positive Coaster, and hit save. So now that you're all done, you have both of these ready to go. It's time to go into the shop to make these pieces, these 1/2 inch thick pieces, and then we can get them lined up on the CNC and run.